Okay, so I am currently at my work right now, and so I decided that I think it was a good time to do a practice problem. So I was talking about like doing this. I was building some reservation system application essentially. Actually, I need to go back so you can see over here that I have not started the course yet. I only went through the Q&A, but it's like building a restaurant reservation system, and so I am going to attempt to do that in this session, or at least to have like more of a high overview of it. So some of the things we did answer, so I guess I can make a box for this, is so restaurant reservation system. Okay, so one of the things we talked about is that this is going to be for multiple restaurants, right, for scalability reasons. The other thing we wanted to talk about was, oh, why is it so tiny? Give me a second. This is really hard. Okay, so I have to keep copying and pasting this thing. I swear, I'm gonna get an iPad one day that's going to do all this for me instead of having to do all this stuff. Okay, so we talked about how this is going to be applying to different multiple restaurants, and in addition to that, you know, the user's perspective is that the users are going to be both customers that are going to be registering or booking those availabilities in those different restaurants, and then we have restaurants, right? Restaurants are uh, another customer. And we talked about how there was some ideas where restaurants, because as a user, you want to see like your rating, how you're doing, or some analytics of like, the booking that your customers do, right? Those are always good data, but we're not going to focus it in this particular section. We just want to get through some of the main points. And also, as a user, yeah, we want to look into the user perspective. And so the basic idea behind it is we want to, users are going to go on the websites, they're going to need to search it. So there is going to be a filter to see what restaurants that they want to see. And so the basic functionality is there's going to be search, there's going to be a radius. Um, I guess there could be some sort of rating to see like what level of ratings that you want to go for whenever you're searching. And I think in addition to that, we also have the so search, radius, ratings, and then we have categories. And so that's really like whether you're craving Chinese food or Mediterranean food, Indian food, you name it, right? So we got the multiple restaurants, we have the customers to restaurants as users, we have the different filters that the users are going to be putting down to find those restaurants. Um, and am I missing anything? I think it's also important to mention that this is going to be global. This is a global application, so this is not just in the United States. This is in other continents as well. Oh, not global United, global app, a global app. And yeah, I think that's kind of enough information for us to kind of start understanding what's going on. And so I have not done a system design question for a long time, so brace yourself. Okay, so we are building an applications where restaurants can display their open seats, their availability, and then customers can go on the websites where they can put in their filters for searching, radius, ratings for different categories, and then be able to search that restaurant and book any availabilities for that restaurant. And this is going to be an application that is going to be global from any location. And so I think the first thing we need to think about is like instead of before we even build out structure, we need to build the algorithm that is going to be behind this restaurant reservation system. And so again, I'm going to be looking. So I guess as a user, right? So we have our page over here, right? And so we need some sort of. So I'm just going to build it from like as a low level, like I'm not even going to think about system design quite yet. We're just going to build a simple application, right? And so the first thing I'm thinking about is that we have this API, right? And so this API is going to provide us a few interesting data, and I feel like I shouldn't do that. I think I should diagram it yet. I think we can go back here in the drawing board as an example. There we go. So some API endpoints to consider, right? So one of the things I'm thinking about is we could have a slash API endpoint, right? So we need to find the restaurants, right? So we're going to be API restaurants, right? And then it's going to be using some, oh shit, restaurant? I can't spell restaurant. Oh no. How do you spell restaurant? Oh no. I forgot to spell restaurant. Oh, that's how you spell it. I had it right. No, I did not. You somewhere. Yeah. So API restaurant, and then we have some query parameters that is going to be doing some sort of filtering, and that's going to provide us like the various restaurants, right? So that's pretty easy. Users can actually see all the different restaurants, see the ratings based on what they put down. And so the next interesting thing that comes of this is how do we actually book these different places? And so once the user clicks on a specific restaurants that they're interested in, and so I'm just going to do a basic layout. We have API restaurants, and I am sure that when you click on that, there's going to be an ID that is associated to this restaurant, right? And so this is going to provide some data. So this is gonna, I should do this, get all restaurants based on filter. Okay, and then this one right here is going to get specific data of restaurants. And when I say specific data of restaurants, I'm talking about like we're going to provide the name, the description of it, we're going to provide the different menus that it provides, the ratings, and then we're also going to provide the availability of those different dates as well. So I think, can I spell restaurant? How come that does not look right? Is that how you spell restaurant? This is going to bother me. For some reason, I never realized restaurant was spelled so weird. Okay, anyway, so we get the specific data from the restaurants, and like I mentioned, I should do these as bullet points, right? But the idea behind it, oh my god, come on, let's go. There we go. So we are going to have, we're going to have the description of the restaurants. We're going to have the availability. Availability of the restaurants, right? Really their calendar, right? Because I'm just imagining a calendar, and then the user just clicks on it and they just book it, kind of like Calendly. I have never used this type of applications, and like just some basic things like ratings and etc. Everything like that. And so that's kind of what the idea is going to provide. And so once we provide all those data inside that one page for that particular month, I'm also thinking about this too, that there might be a possibility where um, they want to book a particular day, like right to the future. And so I guess like by default, like if the restaurant has never even did anything with this date, it's just going to be disabled, so users can't even do it in the first place. Okay, so we got our filters to get all the restaurants. We're getting the specific data of those restaurants. The next thing is that what happens when you click on one of those calendars, right? To click on it. So we have our API slash restaurants. Um, I guess we say ID, and I guess one of the things we're going to do inside here is we're just going to provide a parameter of so a parameter of the combination of the dates that they're booking for. So it has to be date and time. So date, date, combination of time, and duration, right? It's so interesting, right? Because I guess we can't think in terms of just calendars, right? Because if you have the calendars, then you got all the different times that are associated to that day, right? And so there is a duration for those different types of tables that we need to also consider. And so, yeah, I think that could definitely work. So we have the daytime, we have the duration. And I totally forgot that, yeah, there's tables that are associated to these reservations, right? So there's different rooms provided. Oh, this brings an interesting complexity. Oh, this is really interesting. Okay, so let's think about the application, right, that the user is going to be using. So we have like what? So we have the restaurants, right? And then what it's going to say is that we have like this table right here, and we're just going to keep duplicating this hell out of it. There we go. Just looks like a building, right? But these are tables, right? And so I think the basic idea is that first thing what the users is going to do is they're going to hit a calendar, they're going to click on the date, and then they're going to click on a time. And then once they figure that out, they get to pick the different seats that they want to take. And so these different seats are associated to. Oh man, my brain is so fried right now. But what I'm thinking in my mind is that you can. So I guess the logic behind this is that if there's any. Wait a minute. So the restaurants isn't really putting out dates and times, right? They're just putting out availabilities of tables. So I should not confuse those two things, right? So they're not providing times. That's like the only time that they care about is the date that they open and the date that they close, right? And the days that they're actually open during the weekdays or weekends, whatever, in the weeks. And so basically, it's the users that are the ones that initially set up those times. So I think, but also, okay, let's take that back, right? I'm thinking too deeply into one scenario because I think there also might be some situations where, like the restaurants, probably. Okay, so there's two things that we need to consider about. We need to consider the user's time, the date and time of the restaurants, and then so I think what I'll just do here is I don't know what I'm trying to get at. Yeah, but we basically so as a user, I'm gonna come so as a restaurant, right? I'm thinking the user perspective. If I come into a restaurant, or if I'm a restaurant that wants to put his restaurants online, what I would do is I will go on, I will register my restaurant on there, and then I would show all the different available tables that I have, right? And then the next thing I will do is I will set the date and time of when my store closes and opens, and the days where I'm closed and open during the week. And there is going to be situations where certain days are going to not meet a certain time, right? Like let's say that I have to close the store a little bit earlier, right? Those situations should definitely be open. And so, yeah, that's two things. I need to set availability for the restaurant, and I have to show the availabilities of the actual tables themselves. So that means if a user, for example, books one of these things right here, right? Oh, sorry, I should make it red. They already booked it between those times. It should not be read anymore after a certain time is met after a user has registered for that. So right, right. So like So as a user, right, I'm going to be coming in and I am going to be putting down my times and dates. And so really what our software is going to be able to do is they're going to be able to compute to see like if there's any conflicting times with the dates that you chose or with the tables that you chose as well. And so I guess at the root of all of this, the algorithm that we're trying to create is to see whether or not that the user just gets to put a date time and then they just need to see what tables are available, right? Is what we're trying to get at. So this is really interesting. So I think this should be another API endpoint, right? This is like a whole feature by itself. This is like the bread and butter of the application. And so really what we're trying to do is we're going to need to determine an additional availability, right? How do you spell that? I swear to God, I can't spell shit. Availability. Okay. And so the parameters that it's going to take is just the user's date and time, and then like the place or the actual entity that they want to book. I don't know in system design that we're actually allowed to do database designs, but honestly, I feel like this makes a lot of sense, right? So let's actually build a database that kind of pops into my mind. And so we got this database over here. Oh shit, that's not what I want to do. And I'm going to duplicate the hell out of this guy. Let's do that. So the first thing we're going to have is the restaurants, right? The other thing we're going to have is the users, right? Because I guess we should call them. We shouldn't call them customers. Let's just call them users to not overcomplicate anything. And then we're going to also have a combination of appointments, right? So the appointments. So as a restaurant, you got your ID and everything, and then you got like all of your nice data and everything. Users also have an ID as well. And so what our algorithm is supposed to do is it's supposed to, I think, encapsulate everything into the appointment. So let's do this. So the appointment is going to, and keep in mind that for it to get to the database, it needs to be sure that things are not conflicted. So it's not like it's going to store it automatically and then like hope for the best. Like we actually have some validation before it gets saved into the appointment database, appointment table. But yeah, so this is going to also have an ID. This is also going to have date time, and this is also going to have the duration. In addition to that, uh, in addition to that, we're also going to have so ID, date time, duration, and then we're going to also have the mm, date time, duration, thinking. I'm thinking. Hmm. Date time, duration. Sorry, I just had a brain fart. I think tables, table ID, something like that. Right, so I'm just imagining these are just going to be tables at the end of the day, right? And so I'm thinking in terms of, and so this is going to be a NoSQL database, right? And so, yeah, we want tables over here. Oh, wow, this is going to be such a fun system design question because I can already see where this is going. This is very interesting. Yeah, because like eventually, as part of building things that's globally right, it's like how do we make things eventually consistent? And considering that, like, what was that term called? But there's like the race where multiple people can press the same button at the same time and still get the request through, right? There needs to be some sort of locking. Um, but yeah, it's funny how I call this table, but I mean table as in the actual entity. Um, and so we have ID, and then we actually have the restaurant ID it's associated to. Is there an easier way to doing this? I'm thinking in terms of objects, but there might be an easier algorithm. It's okay, I'll just stick with this. And then we're going to have some descriptions. We're going to have the appointment that's associated to this. Right. And so, really, the key idea that I'm shooting for is that the key idea that I'm shooting for is that we have our restaurants, right? We have our users. And then basically, what happens is that a user is going to be booking something. We have some sort of algorithm to determine that. If all is good, it goes through the appointments table. And that appointment table is going to be hooking up with a table from the restaurant. And the reason behind that is because like the user gets to pick what type of table that they want. All right. So I think these are the main things that we required. And so the idea behind it is that we're going to check availability. If it works, we start the appointments. And after a certain time frame is met, then we're going to delete that from the appointment table. And this is going to allow us to have that table free again, that time free, and then other people can continue booking on it. Yeah, so that's the idea behind it. So how do we solve this algorithm for this to work? We want to avoid race conditions, but I think some things that some ideas to consider is that whenever we have a date time, right, we just need to make sure that so all we need to do is we need to make some sort of query that is going to be searching inside the appointment database. It's going to get the date time, the same duration, the same table of that data. Oh no, we just need to make a query to get so when the user picks the table, it's going to make a query based on that user's table ID. And then based on the date, time, and duration that they pick, we need to see if there's nothing that's conflicting with it. If not, then we can continue on creating the appointment and then we can just book it at that time. Okay, so that's the idea. Oh my god, this is more complex than I thought. This is actually really fun. I actually like this a lot. But yeah, so the algorithm behind all of this is that I don't think I need this. I think you guys get the point whenever I say get specific data for restaurants, right? And so the idea behind this is that I think the algorithm is again, we get the ID of the table the user chose, the user picked, and we get all appointments with that table. Or you know what? Because we already have the table, the daytime and duration, we just have to. Oh shit! But there's durations as well, right? Because some users can actually have like right. So if I actually that actually might not work because if I get a table and we have a date time that let's say that we start 4:30 and it goes all the way for 2 hour durations to 6:30, right? And then my duration for me is that I decide to set a time at 5:30, which is not conflicting with any of the appointments, but it is definitely conflicting because there's a duration problem that comes with it. So that also does not work. So a different algorithm approach is that oh shit, do we have to calculate each individual appointment? I hope not. I don't think so. Actually, why do we need to store the duration when we can actually store the start time and the end time? Hmm? Start time and the end time, right? And so that makes things easier because now if I actually have a certain date that falls within any of those categories, right? So like Duration is just more for a user perspective, but if I actually put the date down and I already pre-calculate what the end date is going to be for that, then I'll be able to just the algorithm will be so much more easier, right? Because now as a user, I pick a table, I pick the start, and I pick the start, I put the duration down, which ultimately gives me the end date. I go into the appointments, right? And then I basically look for that specific tables, and I just need to calculate if any of those start dates and end dates that I have is going to be conflicting with any of those other start and end dates, right? How's that going to look, by the way? There's got to be an algorithm for this, right? Right, because like, so what I'm trying to get at is we have this time block that is between, god damn it. And we have someone over here that wants to book it between 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., right? And so it may not look like they have initially the same dates, but you can see that they conflict. And so my question is, how do we determine whether or not they conflict with each other? The first thing is that we need to actually get a actual form. We need to actually compare through each of the appointments, I'm guessing. There must be an easier map to this. So we're definitely going to be using military time. I don't know if that makes a difference, but I'm just going to do it because it might be easier. Shit. How do you do it? My 12. I can't do math in my head. I guess I'm super fried. 15. I bet it's 15. Then we got 17. So basically, the idea is that if I have an end date that right, because it's going to look like this. How do we calculate that? Oh wait, I have to think out loud. I can't get stuck in this pattern of just thinking quietly. That's something that I'm trying to get better at. 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. And then we have 3 p.m. that's going through 5 p.m. And so how do we know that there's a conflict between them? And so the way how we could calculate that is if I put date, this is just not clicking in my mind right now. I just need to make sure that the start date is not going to be conflicting with any of the middle times. Right. Actually, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, the start date just shouldn't be between any of those times. If it's afterwards, it'd be perfectly fine, right? But the algorithm should check whether or not it's not between any of those time dates. And this makes it kind of interesting, right? Because then we might have situations where this might happen, right? So we have a 16 in here as well. This makes no sense. Let me just do this. Let's put this as, yeah, 16. This is really funky. This might be, I don't know, 18 or something, 16 to 18. Which initially sounds good, but then you can see. Oh wait, but keep in mind, like I said, that whenever we book something, right, we are making the assumption that it is doing that for the first time. So it's not like. So I guess if we have this right here, right, this time that's being set right here. If we try to inject this, right, the first thing we need to check is that, oh, is the 15 within any of these different times? Is the 17 anywhere between those times as well? Yeah, I need to focus on this algorithm a little bit later, but that's the basic idea behind it. But I know there's an easy solution to it. I just can't think about it right now. But that's the basic idea. We have a restaurant table, user table. We have the appointment table where the users is going to click on the restaurants, the table ID. It's going to create the appointment. Uh, it's going to book that table right for that specific duration. And so the restaurant is going to, we have our algorithm, which is going to give it a red or a green to determine whether or not it's available or not at that time period that the user decides to pick. So yeah, that looks good. I think it's ready to start building this thing, right? So let's do some system designs, guys. So I'm gonna put big division. I took so long on that one section, sorry. So I'm figuring these things out as I go. Okay, so this is going to be a distributed system, right? So we're going to need to have a few components to this. This is going to be both a website and a mobile app, so it really doesn't matter. So we need to. So I would imagine that because this is a geolocation, we need to have some geolocation load balancer. Is one of the first things that we're going to need for this. Okay. And so you can imagine that what I'm doing over here is that these are the different applications. So I can call this computer or something. This is our computer. See, let me just have my fun, right? I'm just gonna just use these pictures because I was thinking too hard on that other app problem. Mobile phone, right? Shit, I am almost out of time. Mobile phone, right? So we have a distributed system that goes in here, and then it's going to be hitting our our API endpoint, right? And so the API endpoint is what everything I just talked about inside here, right? We have our restaurants that determines by the filters. We have our specific restaurants that provides data. And then we have the specific endpoint that checks availability. And the parameters for that is it's going to check the date time. It's going to provide the start date, the end date, really, right? And then it's going to provide the entity that we're actually trying to book, which is going to be that table database, that table entity table database that is going to be associated with the ID, the restaurant, and the appointment ID. And so we have our API endpoint inside here. And so we want to make this stateless because, again, with the idea behind system design is that we want to keep things as stateless because we want to grow things horizontally. And so we don't want any state within them. So we want to distribute these things. So these are going to be stateless API endpoints. And again, we have this geolocation load balancer that's going to show which API endpoint is going to get hit. Right. And so is there a way for us to cache this, right? Is there opportunities to cache these different data so we don't have to retrieve them anymore? And I think a great example of that is we don't want to do it for availability dates. I don't think so because that could change quite rapidly. But I think things such as like, you know, storing your favorites, for example, right? Storing personal preferences is definitely a good way to go, I would say. But I mean, that's not the main idea, right? Okay, let me just scratch up. Like, see, I become so tunnel vision for like the very small features. The big feature is really how can we book availability? And how can we, is there any parts of that that we can cache? And we could, right? I mean, like, I'm not. The reason why I don't think a caching is worth it in this type of situation is because, like, caching only makes sense if you know that something is not going to change for a while, right? And so if you decide to work with cache, you have to change like the actual data. You have to add to the cache, and then you also have to change the database as well, right? And so what's going on is I don't know if there's other things we can cache inside there, but now that we have the API endpoint, let's just draw the database while we're at it, right? I think what makes this problem really interesting, though, is I think at the root of this, this really wants to hit hard on this database idea. Like, how can we distribute these databases, right? We can use a master slave pattern where we have one databases that writes all of it, and then we have like all the multiple databases that reads from that right databases, right? A single source of truth. Hmm. How can we shard this? How can we shard this? Right. God, do I even remember what the term sharding means? Let me look at my notes. I'm gonna look at my notes. Oh, this is hard. This is such an interesting problem. I like this so much. Um, yeah, it looks like I'm running out of time because I'm actually on a call with someone, and so I think I need to do this. But yeah, we context API endpoints. It's gonna hit a database that is hopefully gonna be shard. Oh, you know what? Actually, there is a way to identify these things, right? Like different. Ah, no, that's not gonna work either. This is, God damn it. What happens, right? Because at the end of the day, sharding is just more about like how can we take a database full of data and how can we break it down in maybe alphabetical order where we can actually make it easier to search that data, right? Is part of the picture. And so for us, I could split this up. I could append the restaurant names. Ah, that's just no good. I don't like that actually, right? Because how am I going to even search that? Hmm. I think so. That's kind of what I need to study on is this idea of like sharding databases. That's something that I'm very weak at. So I rate that as a no. Yeah, I don't know how to really build this thing up. Such a I might have to review about my system design book on that, but I think I'm gonna stop sharing. I think that was a lot of good work already, right? We kind of talked about more of the internal systems and potentially what the application is gonna look like, but I feel like that's some pretty good progress. I mean, we still haven't figured out like how we want to do the availability algorithm for it, but this is a good start. So anyway, thank you. That was about 38 minutes, and I'm just going to be watching the tutorial to see how badly I messed up. All right, see you. Bye.